Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today is the 6th of September and I have finally finished my first read for the month. I do this every month because I don't like to carry books over from one month into another, so I always start with like brand new books on the first of each month, and then it obviously takes me a few days to finish them because I'm working and stuff, but it always makes me panic if I've not finished a book for a few days. So anyway, it's the 6th. I'm on day 5 of 6 of my work week, which is why I look like this, but I have finally finished my first book of the month, which is the audiobook for Meddling Kids by Edgar Cantero, I think is how you say it. I picked it up because it's the group book for Scooby-Doo-a-thon, which was created by Simone, from me, Simone and I. She's also got Emily and Clint as her co-hosts, which is a really fab idea, and this was the group book. And I'm really gutted to say that I really didn't like it. I've given it 2 out of 5 stars. And to be honest, the only reason I didn't DNF is because it's the group book and Simone's doing an Instagram live in 2 weeks time, and I'd really like to be able to like join in with that, so I pushed through and finished it. But yeah, it was definitely not for me. Basically the synopsis is that it's based on the idea that the Scooby-Doo gang have grown up, and they go back to look at their very last case, which had always like not quite sat well with them, so they go back to kind of reinvestigate it. They've obviously changed the names because of copyright, and one of the characters is dead, one of the gang is dead. That's not a spoiler, that's in the synopsis. One of them's been in a mental institution, one of them's been in prison, and the other one is, I think she's like a bartender or something, but they're all like not really doing very well with their lives, and they all come back together to reinvestigate their final case, and that's what happens. Yeah, I can see why other people like this. I mentioned on Twitter that I was struggling with it, and someone said, oh, it's supposed to be like a B horror movie kind of thing, and it's not, like it's quite tongue-in-cheek, which I didn't realise going into it, and if I'd known that I probably wouldn't have picked it up because I don't really like that kind of thing and that kind of humour. It's really overwritten and just, you know, using like 5 sentences where one would have been absolutely fine. The pace is really slow. I mean, it wasn't until I was about 40% of the way in that anything had even happened, and they'd even like all got together, so I'm fiddling with my fringe as usual. Yeah, it just, the pace was really bad, and even when it did like get into the action, it was just pretty boring. Like, you could have easily read like the last 3 chapters of the book and you would have known everything that happened. Also, one of the characters, he describes her hair like over and over, like so many times, that it just became this thing of like, if he does it again, I'm genuinely gonna scream. There is also a romance in this, and some of the description of it is so cheesy and just really made me like cringe really hard. It just wasn't for me. I probably won't read anything else by this author because clearly it's just not my style. And so yeah, I'm sorry Simone, but I'm gonna give it a 2 out of 5. I'm still really enjoying Scooby-Doo-a-thon though, and hopefully my next read will be a bit more successful. It is the 8th of September and I have just finished my next read for the month, which is The Hanging by Lotte and Soren. This I have been reading as my Fred prompt for Scooby-Doo-a-thon, which is to read a book with blue and white on the cover. It's taken me, it's only 300 pages, but it's taken me so long to finish this book. So the synopsis, I will just read like the first sentence from the back because I don't want to give accidental spoilers. So it says, on a cold Monday morning before school begins, 2 children make a gruesome discovery. Hanging from the roof of the gymnasium are the bodies of 5 naked and heavily disfigured men. So it is a Danish crime thriller. It's also one of the darkest things I've ever read. I need to give trigger warnings for murder, violence, rape, and also discussions of paedophilia, so just be aware if you pick this up. Those are the topics going in. I've given it a 3 out of 5. I did like it. It was interesting. It's more of a like literary crime thriller, I think, because there is a crime that happens and we're following the police unit that are trying to solve it, but it's more about vigilante justice and the rights and wrongs of that and where the lines are, and the question of, should we be protecting everybody in society? Does everyone have the right to protection, or are there certain things that people do that mean that they cross the line and they no longer get the protection of the law? So I found that really interesting. The things that frustrated me, the pace was really slow. The chapters are super short, so that usually means that the pacing is quick. but this really dragged in places, which is why it's taken me so long to read. Also, the ending was just really quite ambiguous, and I was really frustrated because I was hoping like for a satisfying wrapping up. We get multiple points of view, and it just didn't come together at the end, which I find really annoying. Also, I realise this is like such a privileged thing to complain about, but this book is massive. I don't think I've got any regular size paperbacks around, but I've got small hands, and this was genuinely like physically hard to read. So yeah, not my favourite. It was okay, but it's probably going to go back to the book barn. It is the 9th of September, and I've just finished my third read of the month, which is Weve Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. I was reading this for Scooby-Doo-a-thon. It covers off my shaggy prompt, which is to read a book in your best friend's favourite genre, and also Scrappy-Doo because it's less than 200 pages. Steph lent this to me when I went up to see her in Shrewsbury last month. And it's the first book I've ever read with deckled edges, and I'm not sure what the point is. I'm not really a fan, to be honest. It was kind of annoying as I was reading. So this is less than 150 pages long, so I'm not really going to say much about the synopsis because I don't want to give accidental spoilers. Basically following an 18-year-old girl who lives in a house with her sister and her uncle. We know from the start the rest of her family are dead, and then one day one of her cousins comes for a visit, and that's probably all I can say without giving spoilers. First of all, this is a great cover. It also goes onto the back. It's really cool. So I found this quite odd. I enjoyed it. It was really atmospheric and it was really easy to read, but not a lot really happened, and its genre on GoodReads is horror. But nothing particularly horror-y happened. So yeah, I think I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. I really do still want to read The Haunting of Hill House, which is another Shirley Jackson book, one that she's really famous for, although this is also something she's famous for. But yeah, I was kind of hoping to be creeped out, and I wasn't, and there are a few narrative strands that did not in any way get wrapped up at the end, which I always find a bit frustrating. So yeah, didn't hate it. Definitely my favourite read so far of Scooby-Doo-a-thon, and I will be looking out for more by Shirley Jackson for sure. It is the 10th of September, and I have just finished my next read for Scooby-Doo-a-thon. It's my Velma prompt, which was to read a genius protagonist, and I read Matilda. This was a reread for me, and if you don't know, it's about a little girl who loves reading. She's a genius, and it's basically about her going to school, growing up, dealing with a nasty head teacher, and there is also a little bit of magic sprinkled in. So yeah, this is actually Charlie's copy, which he very kindly lent me. And I read it, started it yesterday and finished today. It's always a 5-star for me. Loved it. It's just a wonderful story, and yeah, had a lovely time. It is the 14th of September, and I've just finished my next read for the month, which is The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. Now, there will be a reading vlog up all about this book by the time this video is up, so I will put that here. I'm not going to say too much here because I've already waffled on, and you can go and watch that video, but it's a 5-star read from me. Absolutely adored it, highly recommend it. Read The Handmaid's Tale first, and I'm definitely going to go back and reread her entire backlist. I mean, I've read about half of them, but I'm now definitely going to go back because she is an absolute master. It is the 15th of September, and I have just finished my final read for Scooby-Doo-a-thon, which means I've now completed my TBR, and that book was The Wrath and the Dawn by Renee. Ahdieh, I think that's how you say it. Yeah, this was my Daphne pick, so it was a cover buy. I literally went into Waterstones with my book voucher and picked a book at random based on the cover because I just thought it was beautiful. By the way, if you can hear people outside, I've got the windows open, so apologies. Yeah, so this was a total cover buy, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I've given it 4 stars. It's kind of a Arabian Nights, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, Bluebeard kind of retelling, or it's got definite vibes of all of those things. We're following a 16-year-old girl who has volunteered to marry one of the local kings. He has been killing his bride, so every night he marries a young woman and every morning he kills her. And she volunteers because one of his recent murders has been of her best friend, and so she goes into his palace with the intention of getting revenge and finding out what's going on. So yeah, that's the kind of basic story. I don't want to give any more than that in case I give spoilers. I really like this. I thought it was beautifully written. Like, there's some beautiful descriptions. In that way, it kind of reminded me of The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. It's got that very, like, that's set in like cold Russia, this is set in the desert, so it was totally different in that way. But it's just the, like, how beautiful the writing is, and all the descriptions of like food and clothing and her surroundings. It was just stunning. So yeah, I was really gripped by it. I also loved our protagonist. She's so like smart and clever and sassy and brave, and she doesn't wait around for the boys to rescue her or protect her. She can do it herself, and I really liked her. I did also really like the romance in it. There is a romance. This is YA fantasy, I think you'd probably call it. There is a romance in it. I really liked it. It is a bit insta-lovey, which is a little bit annoying sometimes, but I've not read one of these for ages, so it didn't really bug me, and I did enjoy their relationship and the romance. The only reason it didn't get 5 stars is it's really slow paced. Like, it's 400 pages, it's quite chunky for a YA, and not a lot happens. There is a second, I think it's a duology, so I will definitely read the second book, but it just felt like quite a long prologue and a lot of setting up for stuff that will happen in the second book, and that always kind of irritates me. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a random pick and it worked out really well. It is the 21st of September and I have just finished my reread for the month, which is The Dreamwalkers Child by Steve Voake. So just to give you a little bit of background and context for me and this book, I was incredibly lucky to be taught by Steve Voake when I was on my undergrad degree at Bath Spa University. He taught a module called Writing for Young People, which I took in my second semester of my third year, so literally right at the end of my degree. And he saw something in my writing that he liked, and he encouraged me to apply for the MA, the Master's degree in Writing for Young People, which I did. And then when I was unexpectedly successful on getting onto the course, which is a story for another day, he was also one of the tutors on that course. So I was very lucky to be taught by him for 2 years. So I do know him, although I've not seen him for years. This is his debut novel. When he wrote this, he was a head teacher at a primary school near where we live. And he had an idea for a story, and he would get up at 4 in the morning to get his pages written before he would then go and do a full day at work. And this is the book that came from it. So yeah, a little bit of context there. Firstly, also, this is such a great cover. He's now written loads of loads of books for kids. So he does like middle grade and a little bit of YA. This one is sort of on the boundary between middle grade and YA. There's bits of it that feel very middle grade and then bits of it that feel a bit older. So it's a little bit difficult to put a label on, but probably I would say YA just for safety. Like, I'm not sure, I don't think Charlie's ready to read this yet, and he's always my yardstick when it comes to aging on books. Also, if you can hear noise in the background, Jack has just come into the room. Yeah, so this is a fantasy sci-fi adventure. It's about a boy called Sam who is not having a great time, and he goes out on his bike one day and he's hit and run over, and when he wakes up he's in a different world. And that's kind of as much as I can say without giving spoilers, and we follow him basically on this adventure. Yeah, I've read this a few times and I always really enjoy it. It's a really great adventure story. It's got so much heart to it, and it's really well planned out, and the worlds are built really well. And yeah, if you're looking for a fun adventure story that's for a slightly older child, then yeah, I would definitely recommend this, and I've very much enjoyed my reread. I've given it 4 stars. It's the 16th of September. I've just finished my next read for the month, which is Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. I picked this up on Scribed because I saw that Nicole had read it and loved it, and a few different people had really enjoyed it, so I thought I'd pick it up. It is a YA murder mystery, and we're basically following 2 timelines. So it's set in a school for like gifted kids, but each of the kids has got a very specific thing that they're studying. So they might be studying writing or engineering, or in the case of our main protagonist, mysteries and crime. So we're following a current day storyline where we're following Stevie, who is moving to the school because she wants to study true crime, and then we're also following a storyline in the 1930s when the school first opened, when a murder took place. And then in the current timeline, things start happening and Stevie is kind of uncovering the mysteries. of what's going on. That's kind of all I can say without giving spoilers. I've given it 4 out of 5 because I thoroughly enjoyed it. The writing style was really interesting. It kind of reminded me of Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire, but I think it's because it's kind of set in a boarding school for kids with specific abilities, and there's no magical realism in this one, but it's just had similar vibes to it, and the writing style felt quite similar, so that was kind of nice because I loved Every Heart a Doorway. I didn't give it 5 out of 5 because the pace was a little bit slow for me, and I know that loads of people will love the ending, but it irritated me. The endings really irritated me, but it has made me want to read the second one, so I guess it's done its job. And I will definitely be listening to the second one soon. I probably won't listen to it this month, maybe not even next month, because I kind of feel like I need a break from YA for a little bit now. But yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it. Would definitely recommend it, and I can see why other people have enjoyed it. It's the 22nd of September, and I have finished my classic for the month, which was Anne of Green Gables by L.M.Montgomery. Did I get that right? Yes, L.M.Montgomery. This is the story of Anne of Green Gables. I mean, there's not really much of a plot. It's basically about a brother and sister who decide that they're going to adopt a boy to help them out on their farm, but instead a girl, Anne, arrives, and they basically decide to keep her, and it's the story of her growing up at Green Gables, which is their farm. This is probably one of my least favourite of the children's classics I've read. In fact, it definitely is my least favourite. I didn't hate it. I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 stars, but it was just, there wasn't really a plot, and a lot of it was fairly repetitive. There are some beautiful descriptions of nature and all that kind of thing, which was nice. I think for me it was just a little bit sweet, which isn't really my thing. I need to look it up. I will look it up after I film this clip, and see if it was one that was published in like weekly or monthly magazines when it was written, because it does feel very episodic. And yeah, I mean, it's 430 pages. It's quite chunky for a children's classic. It's definitely the biggest one that I've read, and it did feel quite repetitive. I did enjoy the last third probably the most, which is when she's kind of a teenager, and is going like off to kind of college and things. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't reread it. I mean, I will keep this beautiful edition because it matches my other V&A ones, because it is stunning. Look at that. But yeah, it wasn't quite for me. Still 4 out of 5 because I did enjoy it, just not as much as some of the others that I've read. It's the 23rd of September, and I have just finished listening to my next audiobook on my way into work this morning, which is where I am. I was listening to Cross Her Heart by Sarah Pinborough, which I've just completed. I listened to Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough last month, and really enjoyed it. This one I'm giving a 3 out of 5. I didn't enjoy it quite as much. So we're basically following 3 women, well, 2 women and a girl. We're following Lisa, her daughter Ava, and Lisa's best friend Marilyn. And as with most thrillers, I can't really give you any more than that. It's about secrets and lies. It's about history. It's about toxic friendships. It's about childhood trauma. I need to give trigger warnings for most things. Yeah, and I did enjoy it. It was very readable. I really liked the narrator, and it was interesting, plenty of twists and turns. It just didn't quite grip me as much as Behind Her Eyes did, and it kind of felt a little bit predictable. I mean, I knew what the ending was going to be before I got to it, which I did with Behind Her Eyes partly, but not completely. So yeah, it was fine. It's an easy read, and I would recommend it if you're looking for an easy kind of thriller read, but it didn't blow me away. It is the 25th of September, and wow, this is a look. It's Wednesday, and I'm exhausted after a long day of work. Look. But I have finished another book today, which was Down Among the Sticks and Bones by Sean McGuire, which is the second book in the Wayward Children series. I listened to the first one because I've read both of these on Scribed. I listened to the first one, I think it was last month, but my memory's awful, so it might have been the month before. It might have been August, actually. And thoroughly enjoyed it, unexpectedly so, and so I thought I'd pick up the second one. This is obviously book 2, so it's kind of difficult, although is it book 2? It was written second, but in terms of the chronology of the story, it happens before the events of book 1. So yeah, basically it's the backstory of Jack and Jill, who are 2 characters that we met in the first book, which is all about a boarding school for kids who have found their way into alternative worlds and have then been, for whatever reason, kicked out of those worlds and are trying to reacclimatise back to our world, and they will go to a school with other kids like them. So yeah, Jack and Jill are a pair of twins who we meet in the first book. This one is their kind of backstory, and we follow them into the alternate world that they were in. And it follows what happened to them, and I don't really want to say any more than that. It's really good. I, on paper, no pun intended, shouldn't really like these books because they're very lyrical. There's not masses of plot. You know, it's kind of YA fantasy, which isn't usually my bag. But there's just something about the writing that absolutely captures me. I've given it 5 stars. I loved it. It's very short. It's only 4 hours on Scribd, because they're just like little novellas. But I will definitely be picking up the 3rd book shortly, and I would really recommend this series. It is the 29th of September, and I have just finished my non-fiction read for the month, which is on Unnatural Causes by Dr. Richard Shepherd. I also buddy read this with the lovely Nicole from A Beautiful Case of Books and the lovely Simone from Me, Simone and I. It was our first buddy read, and I thoroughly enjoyed reading this book with them. We've actually already agreed on a very similar buddy read, a buddy read of a very similar book in November, which I'm really looking forward to, because reading this with them was just made it like extra special and interesting. So this is one of those books that was spawned by the This Is Going to Hurt by Adam Kay, where it's kind of a professional in one particular area writing about the truth of what it's like and kind of giving their inside view on what that profession is like. This is very, very different to This Is Going to Hurt. This is more of a memoir, and we're following Dr. Shepherd's, basically his whole life. He talks about his childhood and growing up and becoming a doctor, then becoming a forensic pathologist. I kept getting that wrong while we were talking about it. So forensic pathologist. So he deals with dead bodies. And he talks about some of the cases that he was involved in and some of the horrific events that he was involved in, and also how his life how his job was sort of intertwined with his life. So yeah, I found this absolutely fascinating. I've given it 5 stars. It's very personal. It's very honest. There are trigger warnings, obviously for death, but also for the death of babies. He talks about rape and murder cases that he was involved in. He talks about accidents that he was involved in. He talks about terrorism events that he was involved in. So just be aware going in, there is a lot of real in detail descriptions of those things. There were parts, particularly at the start, where I had to actually skip over some of it, because although I'm perfectly fine reading like a Karen Slaughter or a Sarah Pinborough book where it's really graphic and there's loads going on, I can read that fine. But I think it was because I knew he was talking about real people and their actual bodies. I found it really hard, and there's also quite graphic descriptions of autopsies and how they are carried out, and I'm quite squeamish, so I did have to skip over those little bits as well. But overall, I thought I don't have any criticisms of it at all. Really well paced, really fascinating. I learned loads of stuff about the human body that I didn't know, and also about death and the process of death. And I would, very much recommend this if you're looking for a non-fiction. I'd really recommend this one, but just be aware of the triggers going in. It's the 29th of September still, and I have finished my second 5-star read of the weekend, which is Demon Dentist by David Walliams. So, the story behind this: Charlie got me a book voucher for my birthday. We went into Bristol to Cabot Circus this weekend, and I'd been saving it to kind of spend when Charlie was with me. And so I asked him which book he would recommend me as his favourite, and he picked this one. So I bought it, I read it, I tweeted about it, and David Walliams liked my tweet, which I've posted on Twitter and Bookstagram because I have zero call about that, and Charlie also thought it was like the best thing ever. And I've read this book, started it yesterday, finished it today. It's over 400 pages, so it's quite big, but like the font and stuff is massive, and there's also illustrations all the way through, so it's not really quite as big as it looks. Yeah, I kind of can't really tell you much about it because it's about a little boy named Alfie, and it's about a dentist that moves to his town, and I don't really want to give away any more than that. It's majorly reminding me of Roald Dahl. In the style and the language, even the illustrations, it's very reminiscent of Roald Dahl, which was lovely for me because it's quite a nostalgia trip in a weird way, even though it's a new read. It's also got some themes around poverty. There's a parent in this who is ill. The ending's quite sad. So yeah, like a Roald Dahl book, it's kind of darker than you might expect when you go in. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Charlie loves that I've read his favourite book. So we're winning all round. So those are all the books that I read in the month of September. I had a really good September in terms of reading, and also just general life has been pretty good in September. It's all just rolling along nicely, which is great. I'm going to quickly run through my stats and then talk briefly about my favourite book of the month and 2 honourable mentions. So stats wise, I read 13 books, which equated to 4,339 pages over the month, which is 144 pages per day, which that's been my average over the last few months. So yeah, which is pretty good. And it does mean that if I keep going at this rate, I am on track to hit 150 books this year, which would be really great because that is the target that Charlie set me when I hit 150 books back in August. In terms of ratings, I didn't DNF a single book this month, which is great because I have had a couple of DNFs over the last few months. I also didn't give out any 1 stars. I did give 1 2-star, 3 3-stars, 4 4-stars and 5 5-stars. So yeah, I had a really, really good reading month overall. Most of them are 4 or 5 stars. And then in terms of genre, I read 2 mystery, 2 thriller, 1 horror, 3 children. So I read quite a lot of children's books this month. 1 literary fiction, 1 fantasy, 1 classic, 1 YA and 1 non-fiction. So yeah, I've had quite a good spread of genres again. Now, my favourite book of the month will not be a surprise to anybody, and that is Testaments by Margaret Atwood. I've already talked about this at length in the vlog, which has already been linked in this video, but I will also link it down below. It was always going to be my book of the month for September, so that's not a surprise. So because of that, I just want to give 2 honourable mentions to 2 very different books that I've really enjoyed. The first one of those was Unnatural Causes by Dr. Richard Shepherd. I just found this really interesting. I learned a lot about death and about the body, and I just really enjoyed it. It was something a bit different to what I would usually read, so that was great. And then the second one I want to give an honourable mention to is The Wrath and the Dawn. This was such an unexpected treasure for me this month because, like I said, it was a total cover buy, which I don't usually do. And it's YA, fantasy with a romance element to it, and it wouldn't usually be something that would appeal to me, but I just loved it. I also adore this cover, and I think there's 2 more in the series, if I think I'm right. There's at least 1 more, but I'm definitely going to pick up the second one because I just thoroughly enjoyed it, and I love it when I find a book by accident that surprises me in a good way. So yeah, those are all the books I've read this month. I hope you enjoyed this video. The next one up will be my bookshelf tour, which you're getting a kind of sneaky preview of there. And yeah, I hope to see you in the next one. Thanks guys, bye!